February 1959. Deep in the frozen Ural mountains of Soviet Russia, 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their tent from the inside using knives. They flee into a blizzard in sub-zero temperatures, some barefoot, some wearing only socks, leaving behind warm clothing, food, and their only shelter. Within hours, they're all dead. When searchers find their bodies weeks later, the scene is beyond disturbing. Some have fractured skulls. One woman is missing her tongue and eyes. Several have broken ribs, injuries compared by a Soviet doctor to the force of a high-speed car crash. Some are partially dressed in clothing found to contain traces of radiation. Their tent is shredded from the inside. The official Soviet investigation concludes they died from a compelling natural force and abruptly closes the case. For 65 years, the Dyatlov Pass incident has been one of history's most terrifying unsolved mysteries. Theories have ranged from avalanches to yetis, from infrasound-induced panic to alien encounters. But there's another theory, one that connects this 1959 tragedy directly to World War II and the Cold War weapons programs that emerged from it. A theory that suggests these 9 young people accidentally stumbled into a classified Soviet military testing zone, conducting experiments with weapons technologies developed during or immediately after World War II. Evidence points to parachute mines, rocket tests, nerve agents, or other experimental ordnance, technologies that had their roots in wartime weapons development. And the Soviet cover-up? It wasn't to hide a natural disaster. It was to protect military secrets that could have exposed weaknesses to the Americans during the height of the Cold War. Today, we're exploring the WW2 connection to the Dyatlov Pass mystery, and why it might be the explanation that finally makes sense. Before we dive into the WW2 connection, let's establish exactly what happened. On January 23, 1959, 10 experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on a winter expedition across the northern Ural Mountains. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorten, about 10 kilometers from where they would ultimately die. The group's leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a radio engineering student. The group included 8 men and 2 women, most in their early 20s. All were experienced hikers and skiers attempting a Grade 3 trek, the highest difficulty certification in the Soviet system at the time. On January 28th, one member, Yuri Yudin, turned back due to joint pain and illness. This decision saved his life. He would be the only survivor, and he would spend the rest of his life haunted by what happened to his friends. The remaining 9 continued their trek. Based on their diaries and cameras found later, we know they made camp on the evening of February 1959 on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name in the local Mansi language translates to Dead Mountain. That night, something terrified them so profoundly that they cut their way out of their tent from the inside and fled into a blizzard with temperatures around 25 to 30 Celsius or 13 to 22 Celsius. Some wore only underwear, some were in socks, a few had single boots. They didn't run randomly. Footprints showed they walked in an organized line about 1.5 kilometers downslope to a forest. At the edge of the trees, 2 men, Yuri Krivonyshenko and Yuri Doroshenko, built a fire. They were found dead there, partially undressed, showing signs of severe hypothermia. About 300 meters from the fire, 3 more bodies were discovered: Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They appeared to be trying to return to the tent when they collapsed and died from hypothermia, but the last 4 bodies weren't found until May, when the snow melted. They were buried in a ravine under 4 meters of snow, and their condition was shocking. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had massive skull fractures. Ludmila Dubinina had severe chest trauma, fractured ribs, and was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips. Alexander Zolotaryov also had severe chest injuries. The force required to cause these injuries was compared by Soviet medical examiner Dr. Boris Vozrozdeny to a severe car crash. Yet there were no external wounds, no cuts, no bruises, just internal trauma. And here's what made it even stranger. Some of their clothing tested positive for radiation. The Soviet investigation, led by prosecutor Lev Ivanov, interviewed witnesses, examined evidence, and conducted autopsies. But the conclusions were bizarre and unsatisfying. The official determination: the hikers died from a compelling natural force. No further details, as the case was closed on May 28, 1959, barely 3 months after the incident. The area around Dyatlov Pass was immediately closed to the public for 3 years. Files were sealed. Witnesses were told to remain silent. For decades, the Soviet government maintained this story, but after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, something remarkable happened. People who had been silent for 30 years began to talk. In 1990, Lev Ivanov, the prosecutor who led the investigation, published an article admitting that his team had no rational explanation for what happened. More shockingly, he revealed that after his team reported seeing flying spheres and strange lights in the sky during the search, he received direct orders from high-ranking regional officials to dismiss this claim and remove it from the official report. Ivanov stated, "I suspected at the time, and am almost sure now, that these bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the hikers' deaths." Other witnesses came forward. Local Mansi hunters reported seeing strange orange lights in the sky on the night of February 1-2. Another hiking group, about 50 kilometers south, reported seeing bright orange spheres in the northern sky around the same time. The Soviet military units stationed in the region, when interviewed years later, admitted they had been conducting some kind of testing in the area during that period, though they refused to specify what kind. Documents released after the Soviet collapse revealed that parts of the case files were missing. Photos were removed. Testimonies were redacted. The government had clearly been hiding something. So how does World War II fit into a mystery that occurred 14 years after the war ended? The answer lies in understanding Soviet weapons development during and after WW2. The parachute mine theory. During World War II, both the Allies and Axis powers developed various types of parachute mines and aerial bombs. These weapons would be dropped from aircraft and descend slowly via parachute before detonating. After the war, the Soviet Union continued developing and testing these weapons. The northern Ural region was remote, sparsely populated, and ideal for military testing. Some researchers believe the Dyatlov group may have been in the wrong place at the wrong time during a parachute mine test. The compelling natural force mentioned in the official report could have been bureaucratic code for a military weapons accident. This theory explains several mysteries. The severe internal injuries without external wounds, consistent with blast pressure trauma, the orderly evacuation from the tent, military personnel may have ordered them out, the strange lights witnesses reported, flares or explosions from testing, the radiation on clothing, contamination from military ordnance, the immediate cover-up and area closure, the rocket and missile testing. Theory. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was heavily investing in rocket and missile technology, much of it built on German V2 rocket research captured after WW2. Soviet scientists, including captured German engineers, were developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and other rocket-based weapons. The northern Urals lay along a testing corridor. The R-7 Semyorka missile, the world's first ICBM, had been successfully tested in 1957, just 2 years before the Dyatlov incident. The Soviets were conducting frequent rocket tests in remote areas. A failed rocket test could explain the strange orange lights witnesses reported, rockets or explosions, the severe trauma to some bodies, impact from falling debris or shockwave, the radiation detected, rocket fuel or military-grade materials, why the area was immediately restricted to recover classified debris, the government's desperate need to cover it up, Cold War nuclear missile secrets, the chemical weapons theory. During WW2, both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union developed advanced chemical weapons, including nerve agents. After the war, Soviet chemical weapons programs continued in secret facilities across Russia. Some theorists suggest that the hikers may have been exposed to aerosol chemical weapons being tested in the area, possibly derivatives of WW2-era nerve agents or newer variants. This would explain the panicked flight from the tent, chemical exposure causing terror and confusion, the disorganized state of dress, mental confusion from chemical poisoning, why some survived longer than others, different exposure levels, the missing tongue and soft tissue, chemical corrosion, the government cover-up, chemical weapons testing was highly classified. Here's where the WW2 connection gets even more interesting. Our recent analysis has revealed something suspicious about the composition of the Dyatlov group itself. According to some researchers, the expedition wasn't just a student hiking trip. Its composition suggests a military-type observation group disguised as students. 3 radio specialists, experts in electromagnetic observation who could detect and document radio signals. 3 nuclear specialists, students with experience in radiation detection and nuclear physics. 3 civilian athletes providing cover and logistical support, Semyon Zolotaryov, a 37-year-old war veteran, and the oldest member, possibly an internal supervisor, Yuri Yudin, who conveniently withdrew before the disaster, possibly an external supervisor. This 9+1 structure is precisely the standard composition of a Soviet military reconnaissance group. If this theory is correct, the hiking expedition may have been a cover for a covert observation mission. The students may have been tasked with monitoring Soviet military testing in the region, possibly without being told they were entering an active test zone. This would explain why they camped in such an exposed location despite being experienced hikers, why they had advanced cameras and equipment, why some had radiation detection experience, why the government worked so hard to cover up the incident, why Zolotaryov, a WW2 veteran with military connections, was part of a student expedition. The tragic irony, if they were sent to observe military tests, they may have gotten too close and become witnesses to a failed or classified weapons experiment, making them inconvenient to the Soviet military. When you examine the physical evidence through the lens of military involvement, disturbing patterns emerge. The tent. The tent wasn't torn randomly. It was cut with knives in a methodical pattern from the inside. Some researchers argue this suggests the hikers weren't fleeing in blind panic, but were following instructions to evacuate immediately, possibly given by military personnel who had arrived at the scene. The orderly footprints. The footprints leading from the tent weren't chaotic. They showed the group walking in a relatively organized line for about 1.5 kilometers. This doesn't match the behavior of people in blind terror. It matches people being escorted or directed. The divided groups. The bodies were found in distinct groupings, 2 by the fire, 3 returning to the tent, and 4 in the ravine. Some researchers suggest this indicates controlled separation rather than random panic. The severe internal injuries. Dr. Vozrozdeny, the medical examiner, compared the chest trauma to car crash injuries, but there were no external wounds, no broken skin. This is consistent with blast pressure from explosives, shockwave from rocket or missile impact barotrauma from weapons testing, the radiation. While 2 of the hikers had worked in nuclear facilities, explaining background radiation, higher than normal readings on specific pieces of clothing suggest recent contamination. Military ordnance, rocket fuel, or nuclear material from testing could explain this. The missing evidence. After the USSR collapsed, researchers discovered that key evidence was missing from the case files. Certain photographs were removed. Some witness testimonies were redacted or destroyed. Military activity logs for the region during that period were classified or lost. Why remove evidence unless there was something to hide? In 2025, researchers proposed a comprehensive theory that ties everything together. The Dyatlov group witnessed a failed Soviet rocket test, likely a derivative of WW2 German V2 technology, and were eliminated to prevent them from reporting what they saw. Here's how the theory unfolds. Night of February 2, 1959, the group camps on Kholat Shakal. Around evening, they observe strange orange lights in the sky, consistent with rocket exhaust or explosions. The hikers begin documenting the lights with cameras and notes. As students with radio and nuclear training, they recognize this isn't natural. They are recording evidence of secret military testing. The intervention. Soviet military personnel monitoring the test realize the hikers are present and documenting the event. The hikers have become inconvenient witnesses to a classified operation. Military personnel arrive at the tent. The hikers are ordered to evacuate immediately. The tent is cut open, possibly to facilitate rapid exit or prevent anyone from hiding inside. The evacuation. The group is marched away from the tent in an orderly fashion, explaining the organized footprints. They're separated into groups. The elimination. The hikers are not allowed to return to warm clothing or shelter. Some die of hypothermia. The 2 by the fire, the 3 returning. The 4 in the ravine suffer severe internal injuries. possibly from being thrown or pushed into the ravine, or from deliberate physical violence designed to look accidental. The cover-up. The Soviet government stages the scene to look like a natural disaster or hiking accident. Evidence of military activity is removed. Witnesses are silenced. The area is closed for 3 years while any remaining physical evidence is cleaned up. The WW2 connection theory explains nearly every mysterious element of the case. Why the strange injuries? Blast trauma, falls, or deliberate violence designed to simulate accident injuries? Why the radiation? Contamination from military weapons, rocket fuel, or nuclear materials? Why the lights in the sky? Rocket tests or weapons experiments? Why the immediate cover-up? Protecting Cold War military secrets inherited from WW2 weapons programs? Why close the area for 3 years? To clean up evidence of military testing and ensure no other witnesses stumbled across classified activities? Why did witnesses see strange lights but were told to stay silent? The lights were real. They were from military testing, but acknowledging them would reveal classified programs. Why was Lev Ivanov ordered to remove evidence from his report? Higher authorities needed to suppress anything that might reveal military involvement. Why has Russia never fully explained what happened? Even today, military programs from that era remain classified. Admitting responsibility would require declassifying weapons testing programs. The WW2 connection isn't just about timing, it's about the legacy of wartime weapons development continuing into the Cold War. The Soviet Union captured German scientists, weapons designs, and research after WW2. Many of the missiles, chemical weapons, and experimental ordnance being tested in the late 1950s had direct roots in Nazi weapons programs. The Dyatlov Pass hikers may have literally stumbled into the ongoing evolution of WW2 weapons technology and paid for it with their lives. So what really happened at Dyatlov Pass? For 65 years, we've been told it was a natural disaster, a tragic accident, or an unsolvable mystery. But when you examine the evidence through the lens of Soviet military testing, programs born from WW2 weapons development, a darker picture emerges. 9 young people full of life and adventure went into the mountains. They may have been on a covert observation mission, or they may have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Either way, they witnessed something the Soviet military couldn't allow them to report. What followed wasn't a natural disaster. It was a cover-up. The compelling natural force that killed them wasn't weather or avalanche. It was the Soviet state itself, protecting military secrets inherited from the deadliest weapons programs of World War II. Today, you can visit Dyatlov Pass. There's a memorial to the 9 victims. The area is no longer restricted, but the Russian government has never fully explained what happened. Files remain classified. Questions remain unanswered. The Dyatlov Pass incident may not be an unsolved mystery at all. It may simply be an unsolved crime, one where the perpetrators were protected by state secrecy and the victims were buried under decades of lies. The connection to World War II isn't incidental, it's fundamental. It's the weapons, the secrecy, the willingness to sacrifice lives for military advantage. These were all legacies of the war that had ended just 14 years earlier, but whose shadow still stretched across the frozen mountains of the Soviet Union. Thank you for watching. If you found this exploration of the WW2 connection to Dyatlov Pass fascinating, please subscribe for more deep dives into historical mysteries. And let me know in the comments, do you think the hikers were killed to protect military secrets? Or is there another explanation? Until next time, remember, some mysteries aren't unsolved because we lack answers. They're unsolved because someone doesn't want us to know the truth.